Hi, everyone. I am David Lipton from The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030. Welcome to our 22nd in a series of weekly podcasts. In my last podcast, we talked about how the United States was the shield of the West and how it was starting to crumble. Today, we will explore our rendezvous with destiny. Are we going to stand tall internationally or just cringe and shrivel up? While people come and go and certain issues always recur over time, many things remain the same. In an earlier podcast, we referred to the waning of American power and, more importantly, of the willingness of our leaders to exercise that power to protect and advance the strategic interests of the United States. I would ask my listeners to keep in mind the two quotes that I'm about to mention. While George F. Kennan's and President Ronald Reagan's comments were reflective of their times, for instance, the Iron Curtain having been replaced by a cyber curtain in our day, and President Reagan's rendezvous with destiny is taken from President Franklin Roosevelt's comments in the 1930s and applied later to the confrontation with the Soviet Union, the truth remains that every generation has its own rendezvous with the challenges of its time. Ours is the decline of the West. Here are the two quotes. First, George F. Kennan, 1951. Quote, "No iron curtain could suppress, even in the innermost depths of Siberia, the news that America had shed the shackles of disunity, confusion, and doubt, and had taken a new lease of hope and determination, and was setting about her tasks with enthusiasm and a clarity of purpose." End of quote. Second, President Ronald Reagan, around 1980. Quote, "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness." End of quote. How are George F. Kennan's and President Ronald Reagan's comments tied to each other? In 1982, Mancur Olson published a well-received book on the rise and decline of nations that show how well-organized interest groups unintentionally undercut the nation's ability to get the most efficient economic results from our economy. The underlying assumption of Olson's study of the U.S. economy was that democracies in times of stable international relations give rise to increasing numbers of interest groups, such as trade unions or businesses or trade associations, or one political party or the other, that have a greater interest in extracting benefits for their members from the society than in creating value for the economy and society in general. Of course, no one ever publicly admits this. They say their demands are in the public interest, and yes, they will probably cost each taxpayer a little bit each day. Much to worry about. You really think? That's all nonsense anyway. The public purse and our economy are being nickeled and dimed to death. Yes, our pockets are being picked. We are imperceptibly sapped of our financial ability to think beyond our pocketbooks as they are getting smaller, let alone look abroad to our military needs to secure our republic. To emphasize the persistence of certain behavior patterns over time, let's turn back to 1787 to Federalist Paper number 10. That was written by James Madison, on the role of factions in human behavior and how the proposed Constitution would deal with the violence of faction. Quote, "Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. By faction, I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens, or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community." End of quote. Call them what you like: factions, interest groups, unions. trade associations, tribal members, political parties. They're all keen on taking a larger part of the economic pie, with a little concern for what happens to the larger needs and sustainability of our republic. No one group intends it that way, but the neglect of the republic and other citizens is the unintended consequence of their respective actions. Let's now put it all together with 3 charts taken from the earlier podcasts. They offer a startling group picture of the high costs of good intentions. What follows are the graphic and pictorial displays of the roads taken and not taken, and hopefully they will be familiar to many, if not all of you. I return to the chart from the Treasury.gov site of entitlement payments versus defense payments as a percent of GDP from 1953 to 2016, because it captures so much of what is happening to our republic. Look at it carefully for a few moments. The next chart displays the inexorable rise of the debt ceiling. Here is a memorable image of the debt explosion needed to cover all of the costs of our good intentions. This chart of the rise of the American debt ceiling over the last half-century graphically displays in a dramatic rocket ship rise to the heavens. Just look at it carefully for a few moments. It's going straight up into the stratosphere. Third, the declining productivity chart. Well, as you know, this has been an old-time favorite from the start of my podcasts. Here is the bar chart displaying the decline of annualized growth rates of personal output, which peaked in the years 1920 to 1970 from 2.82% and tumbled down to 1.62% in the years 1970 onwards. Look at it carefully for a few moments. Note well that the starting in the 1970s entitlement spending and spiraling debt coincided with the sharp decline in military outlays as well as the decline of U.S. productivity. These graphic images show that Americans face a challenge unlike any other in our history. We are eating away our own vitals and diminishing our economic ability to maintain a level of military preparedness necessary to protect ourselves and the Western world. To state the matter plainly and the challenge plainly, will we be able to stand tall and remain the shield of the West, or will we waver in our determination to preserve our republic for posterity because we became so keen and so successful on extracting benefits from the government that far exceeded our economy's ability to pay for them? America is the shield of the West. The sustainability of our republic is the last best hope for the survival of individual freedom on this planet. Never forget that. Our leaders must never forget that. The choice is ours to determine the direction of the republic. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to my channel and refer us to your friends and colleagues. You will hear from me, David Lipton, in a week's time. You can access my ideas and thoughts by visiting Amazon.com and search for my ebook, The Reckoning, July 4th, 2030.